Hello and welcome to today's webinar on water stewardship, an internationally recognised framework for water management. The Renmark Irrigation Trust is our case study today. I'm Jane Gaffel and I'm a member of the Clean Growth Choices Consortium, which is delivering the Queensland Government funded Communities in Transition program. The consortium is made up of the Eco-Efficiency Group, the University of Southern Queensland, James Cook University and CSIRO. We are working with 6 communities in Queensland looking to explore future scenarios for their region. As part of the program, we are presenting a series of webinars on topics of interest to regional Queensland communities. Today's webinar looks at the internationally recognised framework of water management, that is the water stewardship. And we're fortunate to have Megan McLeod from the Alliance for Water Stewardship Asia Pacific, Humphrey, Howie and James John from the Renmark Irrigation Trust here today. And they'll discuss the benefits of water stewardship, particularly in relation to regional areas. So first we'll hear from Megan about the Alliance for Water Stewardship and water certification, followed by Humphrey and James speaking about water stewardship and the Renmark Irrigation Trust. We will then have an opportunity to put questions to our 3 panellists. And if you have a question, I'd like you to add it. You're meant to be able to add it to a Q&A section, but if you can't find that, you can add it to the chat section and we'll try and ask your questions. So now I'll introduce our guest speakers today. A hydrologist by training, Megan McLeod is the Chief Operating Officer and Technical Manager of the Alliance for Water Stewardship Asia Pacific. She has advised on world-leading water stewardship projects, including the Renmark Irrigation Trust and the Western Port programs, and across a range of industry sectors and regions. Humphrey Howie is the Deputy Presiding Member of the Renmark Irrigation Trust and the proprietor of an organic citrus growing and packing enterprise. Humphrey has a degree in agricultural science and a diploma in permaculture design. Humphrey's family business has been growing fruit on the same land for over 100 years. Humphrey is an advocate for good water stewardship and a participant in the piloting the exploration of AWS Group certificate in the Renmark region. James John is the legal and project manager at the Renmark Irrigation Trust. James has a strong interest in the local community, relocating home to Renmark after working as a mergers and acquisitions solicitor in Brisbane. James has been involved in the water stewardship since joining the Trust in 2018, particularly in maintaining the Trust's AWS Gold certification and exploring opportunities for Trust members, growers to achieve benefits of their certification. I would now like to hand you over to Megan to start our presentation.
Thanks, Jane, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. Yes, I'm Megan McLeod and I'll be presenting on the water stewardship section, introducing you to what it is and what the Alliance for Water Stewardship is. Broadly speaking, water stewardship is a way of thinking about water and managing water that moves water from being managed as an input to viewing it as a shared resource that needs to be stewarded, recognising the value it creates for communities, business and also the environment. AWS, or the Alliance for Water Stewardship, is a system of water stewardship that is an credible approach to achieving and recognising best practice water management by industry and major water users. It's a framework that enables water users and their stakeholders to collaborate on solutions to their shared water challenges, and thereby creating efficiencies and reducing the burden and providing better outcomes for everyone. There are sort of the reasons or the goals of AWS water stewardship, but specifically AWS provides a definition for water stewardship, a framework for action or for water management, and that's provided through the AWS International Water Stewardship Standard, which I'll introduce you to. It provides a verification process and program to provide that credibility of recognising good practice. That's through an audit system, and recognition for those who pass the verification process by way of certification. So I'll introduce you to each of these parts of the AWS system. The concept of water stewardship was initiated in Australia, at least, at the height of the Millennium Drought. Businesses and industry were familiar with similar management frameworks and recognition systems, for example, Forest Stewardship Council, or the Cotton MyBMP standards. But when water really came to the fore as a high priority issue, they said we need something like that that is more credible and stronger on water. So my former colleagues here, they started on the process of developing a similar industry system, but specific to water. This is just an example of some of the issues that businesses were facing through not just physical risks related to availability of water, but reputational issues where the major businesses were being named on the front of newspapers. Meanwhile, the community is in high water restrictions. So through experience of my colleagues, they knew that water ebbs and flows, pardon the pun, and that for it to be a successful and relevant program, that it needed to be a global system, a globally relevant system. And so they joined forces with like-minded organisations from around the world who were also looking at, or how do we monitor and recognise good water management by businesses. For example, with the Nature Conservancy in North America, they were looking at how do we engage businesses in water quality management around the Great Lakes there. And so started forming the Global Alliance for Water Stewardship, and they started on the process of developing a water management monitoring and recognition system. In following the Millennium Drought, at least water dropped down the priority list a little bit in Australia. This is sort of speaking to why it needed to be a global program, but of course water is very context specific, and just because the risk is diminished in one location or on one issue, there's certainly always going to be water risks. And not just physical risks, like I said, but reputational risks. And water is globally constantly high up on the risk scale. Each year the World Economic Forum puts out their global risk report, and water is consistently at the top of that. So while the impetus in Australia may have, or the priority may have gone down at the breaking of the drought, it's certainly not gone completely, and is always needs to be on the radar, and we need to prepare for when the next water crisis is going to occur. So, like I said, this group of organisations started on the process of developing the Water Stewardship Standard, and they joined the ISIL Alliance, which is the global body for international sustainability, or environmental and social standards. So we have a standard, but we also have our own standard that we need to comply with, and that sets the codes of conduct and principles that other environmental and social standards comply with, like Fair Trade, Forest Stewardship Council. So there was a framework for us to work within ourselves, and we have our own standard that we need to comply with to maintain the credibility of the process. An important pillar of water stewardship is the multi-stakeholder engagement in it. And so right from the development of the standard, that was made up of a multi-stakeholder committee. From, when I say multi-stakeholder, that's industry, government and community sector, not-for-profits and government agencies, as well as industry representatives. And so not just in the development of the standard, but it's also an important criteria within the water stewardship framework, which I'll get to in a minute. And so they went through 4 years of developing the water stewardship standard, and the first version was released in April 2014. And that water stewardship standard provides a definition for good water stewardship, which is the use of water that is socially equitable, environmentally sustainable, and economically beneficial. A triple bottom line approach that is achieved through a stakeholder inclusive process. And so it does provide a framework for sites to engage with their water stakeholders within their catchment. That involves site and catchment-based actions. It's a standard that can be applied locally at a site level and takes into account the context in which a site is operating, that being their catchment context. So it does this through the process, or the AWS standard, which is made up of steps and criteria. And those steps are: 1, gather and understand data on water at a site level and at a catchment level, so that you understand the context in which you're operating on. You commit and plan. You commit to water stewardship and taking action, and develop your action plan. Then you implement your action plan, you evaluate your performance against your plan, and communicate and disclose your efforts, particularly to your key stakeholders. It's very much a plan, do, check, act process that others would be familiar with through perhaps ISO, with emphasis on including stakeholders and stakeholder engagement and communication, which provides credibility to the operation and to a site's actions. And this process is intended to achieve 5 outcomes related to water. That is good water governance, sustainable water balance, good water quality, important water-related areas, including ecosystems and cultural sites, and safe water, sanitation and hygiene for all. So it is a holistic water management framework, and it's based on the principles of integrated water resource management. So to provide an incentive for sites and people to manage water in this way, there's also a recognition system attached to it. So by achieving successfully the criteria under the steps of the standard and towards achieving these outcomes, good water outcomes, there is a certification system attached to it. And there are 3 levels of certification that a site can achieve. That is core, gold and platinum certified. That's a continual improvement process, and we encourage sites to move up along the performance scale. I provide the Ingham's example on the right hand side there. They started trialling water stewardship right at the start of the development phase. They trialled the draft water stewardship standard, and then when it was released in 2014, they were certified, and that first certification actually achieved gold certification, and then were recertified 3 years later and had moved up and achieved platinum certification. So why water stewardship? It has public and private benefits, so benefits to the sites that are implementing water stewardship, but also catchment level benefits. So we sort of describe sites who are using water stewardship as implementers or users, but also we encourage that promotion of water stewardship by other stakeholders who also benefit from the application of water stewardship. At a broad level, it's an internationally recognised standard, so it's locally applied, but it's globally recognised. It's a method of proving good management within a catchment, and thereby providing those multi-stakeholder benefits. Method of proving consultation and consideration of all catchment water users, and a method of proving fair consumption of water within a catchment. Like I said, there are a range of direct benefits, whether they be through efficiencies or drought resilience or physical water related management benefits, or they can be at a regulatory and policy level. For example, it is a form of voluntary and proactive compliance monitoring. There are business performance benefits and reputational benefits. And the RIT might talk about some of those examples directly. But I'm short of time, so I'll keep travelling. I will mention briefly that it is water stewardship is promoted as a tool for working towards the sustainable development goals. Water obviously underpins most of the other development goals, and by industry and major water users taking action, it certainly works towards achieving those sustainable development goals. So it is promoted at a UN level. Globally, we're currently at just over 40 sites have been certified since the release of the standard in 2014, and over 75 are registered as working towards certification, and that number is growing. We are governed by a multi-stakeholder membership base, and so industry, government and community stakeholders. That is a requirement of us to have that involvement, and we have many members that are rallying behind the principles of water stewardship. And the system is supported by the Alliance for Water Stewardship Network, which is governed by AWS International, based in Scotland, with regional partners that assist local implementation of the system. So we are AWS Asia Pacific, and there are offices based in those other regions. So anyone who needs assistance with water stewardship can come to us. And we're also supported by a network of service providers. They are consultants, trainers, and then of course the third-party auditors that implement the verification program. And this is just a slide about what next steps you might take if you're interested in water stewardship. Certainly join our mailing list and social media platforms. So be informed, you can complete some training, and then you can start getting engaged with encourage a stepwise approach. You can download the standard for free and start to read it and consider, do a self-assessment or a gap analysis about where you think you're at in terms of the standard. And then the next steps, depending on where you're at with that, consider becoming certified and then being certified. So that's me.
Great. Thanks, Megan. So thanks, everyone, for including us in this. My name is James John. I'm the Legal and Project Manager at the Trust. Humphrey and I will jump through the Trust story. We want to give a background on the Trust, so there is a bit of content, so we'll clip along pretty quickly. And if you have some specific questions, we can touch on those in the Q&A. And a lot of these background informations feed into the Trust water stewardship and being a responsible and efficient user of water. So a lot of that story is relevant to our journey to water stewardship. So I'll hand over to Humphrey to get started, and he and I will jump back and forth along the way.
Okay, thanks, James. So my name's Humphrey Howie. I'm the Deputy Presiding Member of the Renmark Irrigation Trust. I've been a board member for 22 years, and I'm also a fruit grower. So Renmark was established back in 1887 by the Chaffey brothers. The other major settlement was Mildura in Victoria. So it was established solely as an irrigation colony, I guess. And we are now sitting here in the boardroom, which was built back in 1888. And all around us are the past chairmans on photos on the wall. So there's a lot of history here, and I guess what we'd like to, highlight is some of the lessons that we've learned in that 125 years, and good and bad, and and how we're progressing along that path. So we are, in the scheme of things, are probably a relatively small irrigation entity compared to some areas around us. We've got 600 irrigator members who irrigate an area of around about 4,800 hectares. Our entitlement is about 37 gigalitres of water, which is shared amongst all our members, have varying entitlements. And we also service quite a growing number of domestic users as well. So we really, it's not just for the irrigation community, it's also for some local community as well that we have to provide water for. So all of our 95% of the crops in the Renmark area are permanent crops. So there is a risk inherent in that. We have wine grapes, citrus, stone fruit, nut crops like almonds and pistachios. Certainly that's a growing area of our crop complex. So, but having that permanent cropping regime requires that we need to be able to have access water on a permanent basis, and it's not like opportunistic cropping in some of the other states, I guess. So, yeah, James.
So the governance of the Trust initially established by statute of the South Australian Parliament. We are a member-based organisation for our irrigators. We have a board, which Humphrey sits on, of 7 directors who are elected on 2-year terms, and then supported by a general manager, some line managers, for a total of about 22 full-time equivalent staff. We have an annual general meeting, an AGM attended by members, which is voluntary, and we act as a self-funded organisation, which is made up revenue from irrigation access charges, water delivery, and other service charges. So I guess one of the journeys or factors that led us to water stewardship was we live in a region which, as a lot of us do, we're subject to extended dry periods. This culminated to an extent in the Millennium Drought, where in this local area, we went through an exit packages arrangement, which was a collaboration with government and the trust and growers who were under stress to support in relinquishing and having the purchase of water entitlements to be returned to the government through a collaborative process between the parties. This to the trust led to a decrease in our rated area and revenue from rates and water delivery, and was one of the impetuses for a re-evaluation and a development of a vision or strategy for moving into a future where these dry times would reoccur.
Okay, so yeah, towards the end of that drought, we recognised the need for a business plan, and we were assisted by our state government in them providing funding for us to do that. So we started off with a vision that by 2020, the Renmark Irrigation Trust will be recognised as Australia's leading water resource manager, underpinning the economic, social and environmental sustainability of the Renmark community. And I guess that particular vision statement really does emphasise the community basis of the Renmark Irrigation Trust. We're not there just to pump water for our members. We are there to actually underpin the infrastructure and the surrounding landscape of the Renmark district. So this led to us forming a partnership with the Renmark Privy Council, the Department of Environment and Water, the local tourism people, and also RDA, Regional Development Australia, the business group. And so we developed a memorandum of understanding, which we would work on some major projects that would benefit the whole of the Renmark area. And I guess the major projects there are irrigation modernisation for our members, rehabilitation of the floodplain, which surrounds the Renmark township, and that was another one, a collaborative effort from mostly the council and ourselves. Renmark Town Centre Revitalisation, which is very much a council enterprise, and the Great River Walks, which was one of the tourist operators. So this collaboration has really focused our attention on the whole of the community, and I guess that's been the powerful thing behind it. And this particular partnership, I think, has really helped us get through, the last 10 years.
So out of those partnerships, and one of major projects for the Trust was part of SARM's 3IP project. And the 3IP is an irrigation industry improvement program with an initial $240 million aim to return up to 40 gigalitres to the river. So within the Trust, we had a number of projects, which you can see on the graph there, that helped us to modernise our infrastructure. One of those I'd like to point out is the telemetry program, which for our growers and for our members is a very useful program for them to be able to access real-time and current data on farm. This was part of the SARM's funding led to the entitlement changes within the Trust. So a combination of those on-farm efficiencies, the exit packages, which I touched on earlier, and the SARM's funding has led to a net reduction in the entitlements, which has, as a result, led to less of a buffer between water on entitlement and our allocations. This becomes important for us with keeping a focus on our efficiencies and having less of a buffer. So onto our water stewardship journey. The Trust was the first irrigation scheme to receive gold certification, and the second entity in the world to achieve gold level. So we received our certification in 2018. Pictured on screen here is our current chairman, Peter Duggan, holding our certification with we can't see is hidden behind screen, but Michael Spencer, who was involved in the setting up of Water Stewardship, along with a few other dignitaries, Senator Anne Ruston, Jody Swipick from the Commonwealth Environment and Water Holder. And this was presented in Renmark as an acknowledgement of the Trust work in water stewardship. So some of our other projects over time that have led to an increase in the Trust's efficiency and delivery of water included a moving from channels to pipes. It's been estimated that this change in infrastructure alone resulted in a saving, I believe, up to about 30% in efficiency, mostly through soakage and seepage loss. Here we have a graph which shows the Trust's, I guess, commitment and focus on delivery efficiency of water. So the Trust operates at around a 99% efficiency in delivery. This is against an Australian average that hovers around the 85% mark. This is delivered through the Trust in a number of ways. One of those is through a pumping efficiency at our main pumping station. We have variable speed pumps, which allows the pumps to operate at optimum efficiency, save energy costs. The pumps move from high voltage to low voltage, which allowed soft charging, and rather than the pumps start at full capacity every time and draw a massive drain, they can operate to increase their energy efficiency. Humphrey, can you talk about the crop?
So the crop water, I suppose, having a very a constant water supply delivered by the Renmark Irrigation Trust has allowed the actual farmers to access high levels of technology within their farms. And I guess an example of this is changing from, flood and furrow irrigation to a drip system or a low-level sprinkler system, which delivers the water far more efficiently to where it's needed. So I guess, and it also allows us, back in the days when there were channels, the number of irrigations that you would actually get was probably only 10 or 12 a year. Now with drip systems, you can virtually get irrigation on demand, and that allows it far more, I guess you can actually plan your irrigations far more easily with a lot more information than previously during the channel system. So it has actually allowed the farmers to come along with the ride and use the best technology that is available.
Another aspect is the governance within the Trust. So part of the Water Stewardship program is an acknowledgement from the Trust that we do want to act as stewards to the environment and be responsible and efficient water users. So we manage that through a number of other observation or safeguarding methods, I guess. One of those is metering, both from the diversion point at the river and metering at the farm gate to help us monitor water loss and efficiency users. We must maintain our compliance with water licences and our legal requirements, and we do manage compliance on behalf of our members and work with them to maximise their compliance.
So I guess the drainage scheme is another aspect of the Renmark Irrigation Trust. We manage the whole drainage system. This was implemented way back in the 1960s, post a very big flood that had happened in 1956, when the township was under threat and many of the settlement areas were actually flooded. This caused a big spike in the saline groundwater coming to the surface, and a lot of properties suffered with deaths and a lot of tree deaths. So the drainage scheme was a big project which comprehensively does drain the whole of the area, and particularly in our soil types, which are very variable, with deep sands going to heavy clays, and it's So that's a very, I guess, intricate sort of management tool that we have. And I guess one of the aspects that happened post-drought too was we actually, the Renmark Irrigation Trust actually does own land which is on the floodplain, which for many years has been used and abused as evaporation basins, has become quite salinised. And so some of that land, in conjunction with some of the council land, we looked at very carefully to see, well, what can we actually, how can we actually revitalise that land? So we had various consultants' reports which looked at schemes of applying water to those areas to look at enhancing the environment around the Renmark community and the Renmark township. So next one. So I guess quite coincidentally, I guess, was the emergence of the Commonwealth Environment Water Holder. And so we were the first irrigation entity in Australia to sign an agreement with the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder. And so that actually gives us the opportunity to use some of that water that we actually sold back to the government through the SARMS 3IP schemes to actually now get some of that water back in return to put in our own floodplains as environmental water. And so we also were the first entity to get a grant from the Commonwealth to actually extend some of our pipelines, which were already very close, adjacent to the floodplain, and start applying water to rehabilitate some of these areas. So even though there's a reasonable length of pipe there, all you see on the floodplain is that little structure down the bottom, which actually allows us to deliver water at peak times or at preferable times for enhancement of the environment. So last year we delivered 337 megalitres. It's actually a fairly small amount of water given the licence that we actually hold. But what we're actually able to achieve with that fairly small amount of water has been pretty amazing. And so it's mostly shallow watering. And at this stage we're watering 5 sites, and we're looking at preparing management plans for another 10 sites in the next 3 years. So eventually, hopefully, the whole of that area around Renmark will be rehabilitated in some form. So it's a win-win situation. It allows us to actually cleanse our pipes, and some of our members do have problems with blockages, which are very hard to deal with as a trust. So by flushing those lines out and putting that water to good use has been a win-win for all of us. So I guess there's just a sample of some of the photographs that we're managing to take and document some of those benefits. Great for tourism, great for the local community, and great for the river system. So this is just a quick view of some of the sites that we're irrigating at the moment, and with another 10 to come on board in the next 3 years. So I was able to attend World Water Week last year, and Megan was also there. I guess the primary reason that I wished to go was to actually engage the appetite for water stewardship in a global context, and I think I was actually very happy with the outcome and the interest in water stewardship in many of those sessions, and happily enough, both our General Manager, Rosalie Orrict, and James will be joining Megan, as well as the Environmental Officer from the Renmark Privy Council. So as a bit of a contingent from this area to, keep up to date in what's happening around the world. And I think that's a very important thing for us to be on top of.
So having worked with the certification process with the trust, we can see within the trust that if we have a sort of social licence to operate in the district, in the irrigation industry, that it is important for us to be that responsible user of water, and the AWS certification structures, standards and criteria are a fantastic framework for us to checks and balances, see what we're doing as a trust, and be confident, I guess, that our practices are to a world standard in responsible use of water. Part of our certification was to also explore, or part of the benefit of our certification was to explore how we can extend the benefit of that certification to our members. So to do this, we had an initial funding and grant from the Department of Primary Industries and Regions, PIRSA in South Australia. Probably that point of PIRSA is also something else with the government department that might be of interest to people viewing, is that the gold certification for the trust also gives the trust some credibility, I guess you could say, in that we can present ourselves in discussions or presentations with this gold certification as a responsible water user. So part of our program to explore with members is, at the moment, looking at putting together a group certification scheme, which Megan has been visiting here and working together on, which is seeing how we can get our members under an umbrella or into a group to gain access to all the benefits of our certification. As a irrigation infrastructure operator, being the trust, we are responsible for a lot of the criteria and metrics to achieve certification. So we are looking at developing a program where our members can not easily, but with minimal interruption or adding work to their livelihood or their day-to-day, prove and show that they are responsible users of water and get access to this certification, both for their own discussions with other parties, but also to gain a competitive advantage in their markets and in a space which is becoming, I would say, more and more socially and vocal in communicating the importance of treating and respecting the environment from which the livelihood is closely entwined. For us, some of the future opportunities that we are looking at are tied to that pilot and program to gain members access to our certification. It's building on our global water stewardship. We are gold certified. We passed our surveillance audit with gold certification, and Ingham's are platinum now, so perhaps we can look at trying to get to platinum in the future. It's also looking at re-establishing for us lost productive land, such as the land through those exit packages that are already connected and serviced by our infrastructure. Extending our environmental watering sites, which Humphrey touched on. We've watered 5. We've actually got one going live next Thursday for the first time, which will be our 6th, and then a total of 15 to come online. And it is, again, the future opportunity to develop these sites. Tourism is a big part of this region, and to rejuvenate and keep our environment beautiful is important and something that's great for the trust to be involved with. At the end of the day, we want our members to benefit from our certification too. This photo is one of our directors is on the far right, Jim at Mallee Estate, and they're a family-run business, and they market to a lot of markets through Asia and the States as well.
As a winery.
Humphrey, as a winery, so yes. And for them, and Jim to recognise real world benefits and benefits from a certification that they can use as a competitive advantage in their industry is something we're really keen to explore and progress. So I think that's it from us, and perhaps opening up to questions.
Yes, thank you, Megan, Humphrey and James, for your presentation today. I've got a couple of questions here. We've got one from Lucy Graham in Far North Queensland, and for Megan to start with, does the AWS certification require community partnerships? If it's at a catchment level, does that capture how different industries interact with each other?
Just to understand your question a little bit better, are you talking about certification at a catchment level? Or so certification of a whole catchment? Is that what we're...
I think that's what the question, so if it's at a catchment level, so if the certification is at a catchment level, does that capture how different industries interact with one another? Yes.
Okay, so to clarify, the certification is at a site level. Sites get certified. At this stage, we don't have a certification program for whole catchments. So I can just see the side of the question there, Nestle, Coca-Cola. So these are sites that are implementing the AWS standard, and part of the certification program or the process of water stewardship is that they have to talk to, engage with catchment stakeholders that are government stakeholders, community stakeholders, and get endorsement from those stakeholders for their operations and their water stewardship program. So actively seek feedback from stakeholders on their water stewardship plan and what's the word that I'm looking for? And performance. So a site can't just say, yes, we're doing all of this and get certified without having engaged and received feedback from those stakeholders for it. In terms of water stewardship at a catchment level, that engagement process is to encourage collaboration between industries, between government and industry, between community and industry, to find the win-win-wins for everyone, and which improves efficiencies in whether that's infrastructure development or in delivering water to the wetlands. It's using Renmark's infrastructure, using the Commonwealth's environmental water for good outcomes for everyone, really. So that's what the water stewardship process is designed for and to encourage.
Thanks, Megan. So the next part of that question from Lucy was that she said, I noticed that Nestle and Coca-Cola are involved with the AWS.
Sorry, James, can you please?
Oh, sorry, I said, so the next part of the question is that I noticed that Nestle and Coca-Cola are involved with the AWS. Traditionally, they have been responsible for some terrible water stewardship globally. What is the interaction that the program has with these brands?
Yes, so these brands are members, and so they have some say in the governance of water stewardship. All members can vote on updates to the water stewardship standard, but a requirement of the water stewardship governance is that it's multi-stakeholder, and each stakeholder group gets an equal vote. So industry doesn't have more votes or representation than government or public sector and community sectors. And if we don't have community members or government members represented in our membership, then we cease to exist. Our credibility is diminished. So we don't meet that credibility standard. So that's one way that those checks and balances are in place. In respect of individual sites, so then Coca-Cola and Nestle are getting their sites certified. That process is managed through, so we own the standard and we manage the standard and make sure it's relevant and credible. And then we have the audit system or the verification system, and that is third-party auditors who are accredited by us, and they go and complete the audits and then report back to us. And they check that each site is compliant with the AWS standard, and if they are, they achieve certification. But there is also a complaints and claims procedure for people to question, and that is through our website too. So yeah, there is a claims complaints procedure in place.
Thank you, Megan. And so the final part of this question also is, there has been a lot of discussion about how we reduce our water consumption. I am in Far North Queensland where new dams are being proposed, and it seems that there needs to be more innovation for how we collect and store water that moves away from damming important ecosystems. Is there much discussion about that in the water stewardship discourse?
Yes, in that water stewardship is based on integrated water resource management principles, and in designing new infrastructure, new development, we highly encourage that form of integrated thinking and systems thinking in the planning of that. We're quite young, 2014 it was released. Obviously, as uptake increases, especially uptake within a catchment, and there's more collaboration at a catchment level, the idea is that there's that intervention in the development and planning stage for major water infrastructure. To describe that a little bit more, you can come at water stewardship from two ways. It's from the site level, and the site starts implementing water stewardship, and they engage outwards with their stakeholders. The other aspect is you have promoters of water stewardship. You have the stakeholders who can see the benefits of collaborating with sites on water stewardship. And so government might then use water stewardship to go and engage with their key clients or stakeholders or major water using sites to find out how they can find these better solutions.
Thanks, Megan. So we've got a question from Don McLaughlin, and he has asked, is there a process to becoming an accredited trainer to help deliver certification locally and regionally? Yes,
there is. You can look on our website, waterstewardship.org.au, or on the global, a4ws.org. You would participate in the training yourself, and then there is a form about your experience and professional credentials in that capacity, and then you can apply for formal accreditation.
Thanks, Megan. And we've got a question from Andrew Chamberlain to the Renmark Irrigation Trust. Could we see that pie chart on where the savings come from again before you finish, please? Mm-hmm. So that might be just a bit more discussion on where the savings came from. The
savings?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's probably that one.
Okay.
Bit further back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one. No, that one, I think. Yeah, so I guess that reduction in entitlement from around about, I think it was around about 46 or 47 gigalitres. Went back to the government as environmental water, to the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder. So I guess the bulk of that return was the SARMS 3IP irrigation upgrade. And so that $16 million upgrade that we did with the Irrigation Trust was required us to return around about, I think it's 5 gigalitres of water. And the exit packages, which are actually actually those areas which you saw on the previous map was allowed 22% of water to be returned. And there was also another scheme, on-farm efficiency scheme, which was directed at the irrigators themselves, and that also delivered around about 3 gigalitres, I think. So that total of 10.8 gigalitres was returned to the environment.
Thanks very much for that, Humphrey. That's all the questions we've got today. So I think that just about wraps up our webinar. Thank you very much, all three of you, for presenting today and giving us your expertise. And thanks to the audience for your participation and your questions. And we've made a recording of this webinar, and a link will be sent out to all the attendees, and it will also be available on our website. And we also have a short survey at the end of this webinar. We'd love for the attendees to fill that out, just to give us some feedback on this webinar and on our future part of the series. So I'll just change the screen. And show you the rest of our series. So our next webinar will be held at 1 p.m. on the 7th of August, and it's Paddock to Plate, Successfully Transforming Agricultural Resources into Food Tourism Experiences. And we have Dr. Michelle Thompson from CQU as our expert in agritourism. And if you'd like to register for that or any of our other webinars coming up, please visit our website. It's just under the title at the top here. And or click on any of the future emails we'll send out and register that way. And thanks again for your participation, and hopefully we'll have you back again next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.